Hey, Brad.
Yo, buddy.
So have you heard the most 2020 thing that has happened so far in 2020?
Besides a punter punting a return touchdown for negative 10 yards?
Okay, so the second most 2020 thing that's happened in 2020. The Cincinnati Bearcats are going to open their season this Saturday against Austin Peay.
Yep.
Austin Peay is closing their season this weekend against the Cincinnati Bearcats.
How does that work?
Because 2020.
You know, Early, sometimes them football boosters will provide your family with a car or even house if you keep nice and quiet about it. They're gonna do what now?
Welcome to the place where if you ain't cheating, you ain't trying is a way of life.
Just keep it down home, cuz.
Where degenerate gamblers can congregate in peace.
Money, yeah. Money, yeah.
Where screaming at 20-year-old kids on TV is just another Saturday.
Every fiber in your bone, and you take it and you beat the piss out of them. I'm talking about beat the piss out of them. Let's go whip their ass. Let's go.
Where game days don't end until the Rainbow Warriors say so.
It hits the upright. Oh my God! It hits the left upright. It hits the left upright.
They are the bagmen that Danny Sheridan never found.
I went to him with a strong-ass offer.
And it all comes to you with a splash of bourbon on the side. Woo! This is the Friends of the Program podcast.
Hello, everyone. Welcome into yet another episode of the Friends of the Program podcast. I'm Brad. He's Drew. As we get set for full football week number 2 of the college football season, we're going to recap what happened last week. All the craziness, including the Sun Belt basically saying we're going to pick the Big 12 out of the Power Fives and just take over. If you bet with us last week, we made you some money. We're going to try to do that again this week. So glad to have you guys along. Always remember that you can follow us on the Twitter machine at FOT Podcast. Same for Instagram at FOT Podcast. Follow us on YouTube at Friends of the Program, and you can follow us via iTunes and Spotify and subscribe to the podcast that way. Drew, how you doing, my friend?
I'm doing very well, Brad. Finally got back from all my travels this past weekend, going down to see the family and getting ready and watching an insane Saturday. There was a lot of poo-pooing, if you will, from some of the from some of the stalwarts. Oh, there are no good games. Oh, there's nothing to watch. And by the end of it, everybody at my house was on the edge of their seat.
We told people there are really good games this week. Don't just look at the top line of, oh, well, it's not a Big Ten team or it's not a Pac-12 team. You just saw the Sun Belt go 3-0 against the Big 12 last week.
Absolutely no question about it. We knew that that Louisiana was going to give Iowa State a game. We knew that Arkansas State was going to sneak around there and give Kansas State all that they wanted.
And we both thought Coastal would win the game outright.
Absolutely. In fact, it was my upset pick of the week. I cannot believe that they were the underdog in that game, and they proved that they couldn't believe it either by going up 28-3 at the half on Les Miles in Kansas, and then just kind of coasting.
Again, second year in a row they've beaten Kansas, by the way. That's not a fluke. That's happened 2 straight years out in Lawrence.
As one of the players said, I think when they made it 21 or 28-0, they can't play with us.
Yeah, it was
and
true.
They were right.
But we hope you guys played along with us last week. We gave out a 3-team parlay near the beginning of the day. It hit for you. Hopefully it hit for us. Hopefully it hit for you. We'll do something similar when we go into next week as well. We always, record the broadcast earlier in the week. We always like to wait till around game day to give out a full parlay just in case the line moves a little bit. Absolutely. But we didn't have to sweat that one out. Everything was very, very comfortable. I think the closest margin we had was 8 points, when 2 of them actually won outright, as opposed to the USA, who almost became the third win to win outright. South Alabama blew that one against Tulane late in that ball game.
Yeah, they did.
But they did cover, and that's all we care about.
The cover stands for a winning weekend, and between Coastal Carolina and Georgia Tech, it was a great Saturday for me.
We even pushed Missouri State out there, and if you got them at 50.5, they covered for you. If you got them at 48 like we did, we got to push, so we'll take that as well. What are you drinking this week, bud?
This week, since I've the aforementioned Georgia Tech pick for me, I'm going to go with a bottle, not the whole bottle, but a pour of St. Augustine Distillery Florida Straight Bourbon.
There's a lot of people in Tallahassee that could have used that on Saturday.
A lot of people. As you can see, there's already just a little bit off the top. This is how much better the Florida State special teams have gotten all year. That's how much better they have gotten throughout the season. And just that little itty bit that didn't block that last field goal that gave Florida State or Georgia Tech the win. So that's what I'm drinking tonight.
I've got the TX whiskey out of a distillery up in Fort Worth. Not a bad little standby whiskey I like to have around the house. It was gifted to me by my neighbor for my birthday about a month or so ago. So cracked it open tonight. We'll try that.
Absolutely. And in fact, I've been kind of thinking outside of the box and doing some travels back, I've already got my next week and the week after drinks. Unless something crazy happens, I might change from a straight pour to a mix. But
it's not going to be that new thing at Red Lobster where it's a Mountain Dew margarita, right?
No, we won't be doing the Code Red Arita.
Yeah, they literally announced a Mountain Dew margarita at Red Lobster.
Oh Lord! I mean,
I feel like there's a father figure in Valdosta, Georgia, who might like that.
I don't get me wrong. They went. I got word that they did go out to dinner for the first time outside of the home for the first time since February this past weekend to meet a friend from out of town. And Dad said that he did have dose margaritas for the senior, not for the senorita, for the
folks,
senior.
There's a long story behind that one that we'll have to tell you at some point.
That's for the off season when there's nothing else to talk about
that
except
does
for college
feel like
baseball.
Story.
Yeah.
All right, Drew, let's look back at last week and the week that was real quick. We've already talked about the Sun Belt, but I think we have to go top line, which is Georgia Tech going to Tallahassee and pulling off a bit of a upset. They were about 11.5-point underdogs in that game. And 4 years in a row now, Florida State has lost the season opener. You know, at what point do you start looking at Florida State and going, your problems are much more systemic than maybe than just a coach change, which is now they're in the third coach in 4 years?
It's somewhat misleading when you say that this is their fourth loss, Florida State's fourth season opening loss, because last year it was Boise State. The year before that it was Alabama.
And I can forgive Alabama.
I can forgive both of them. Boise State is a really good football team with a great pedigree in the past. Georgia Tech, however, I mean, let's go back.
It's a true freshman quarterback they lost to.
Not even that. I'm even willing to forgive that. Let's take a look at recent Georgia Tech history. This is a team last year that only won 3 games, and this football team was not that good at all.
By the way, the other team they lost to was Virginia Tech. Sorry.
Thank you very much. That's what I was looking. That's what I was reaching.
But 3 of the 4 losses were in Doak Campbell.
Now that's also true. 3 of those 4 losses are at home. But you're talking about a Georgia Tech team last year, 2019 only. Jeff Collins' first year, so he gets somewhat of a pass. Beat South Florida, won at Miami, and beat NC State. They also lost to the likes of the Citadel, Temple, Duke, Virginia Tech, Georgia again. Prior to that, 2018, you're talking about Paul Johnson's last season when they beat Alcorn State, Bowling Green, at Louisville. They won at Virginia Tech and at North Carolina with Miami and Virginia as well, losing to Minnesota in the Quick Lane Bowl, former Little Caesars Bowl. So you're talking about a 7-6 Georgia Tech team. 2017, which is kind of their last big kind of win. When they beat Jacksonville State, who was number 5. That was the year that they played Georgia Tech in Atlanta. Lost to Tennessee in Atlanta in that game. But they beat number 17 Virginia Tech. That was the last big win in Georgia Tech program history going back to 2017. And that was against the Virginia Tech team that was still on the downturn. Yeah. This is a Georgia Tech program that has had futility. This is probably about 2016 when they somehow rattled off a win against Georgia.
I'm pretty sure the first drive of the game, they completed more passes than the entire Paul Johnson era.
Absolutely. Oh, yeah, no. It's to see, and that's sort of where I'm going with this as well. I mean, this is the Georgia Tech program that really has been laying dormant since about 2016, when they won the Gator Bowl, the Tax Slayer Bowl back then, and beat Georgia to close out the 2016 season. But that was with Paul Johnson. In 2 years, Jeff Collins has been able to transform that team into something that looks good. Even though it was 10-0 Florida State at the half, you could look at the stats and go, this ain't going to be that game for Florida
State. You
State.
just mentioned the stats. Let me read this off to you. Jeff Sims, true freshman quarterback. And remember, this is a free year for him. He's a true freshman again next year. So I think it's genius that Georgia Tech's going to play him all season long. When they're playing 11 games and 10 of them are conference games and the 11th one this week, that's a doozy on the schedule, and that's going to be one of our picks later on when they take on UCF. But he went 24 for 35 for 277 and 13 carries for 64 yards on the ground. So alone, Jeff Sims accounted for, let me do some quick math, 241 yards?
Yeah.
Or 341 yards, I'm sorry.
341. Yeah.
As a true freshman.
Mm-hmm.
That's on the road, and granted, it's not a traditional road environment, but
still,
that's damn good work.
Well, and not just that, but you also have to throw in there that you can go, oh, well, it's just Florida State. Florida State still doesn't have any, all that talent built back up. This Florida State football team on defense is salty. I hate to do this to Auburn fans, but Florida State's going to look Auburn's going to look a lot like Florida State. Salty defense, questionable offensive line, and I think Bo Nix is a little bit better than James Blackman, but still some of the same kind of struggles just because of the offensive line. Yeah. So don't think that Georgia Tech and Jeff Sims did this against a weak Florida State defense. No. This is a real salty, deep Florida State defense that they did this against and put 16 points up in the second half alone.
Two other ACC teams I want to hit on real quick. One, Thursday night. I thought Miami looked very good, especially on offense in the second half when they got everything together. Quarterback's going to be a challenge for everybody else in the ACC because not Tyler Johnson, but Cameron Harris, quarterback for Miami, he's going to be a handful. I'm sorry, I just said Cameron Harris, and it's not Cameron Harris. It's Derek King, my fault there. Yeah. But he does enough to Cameron Harris is their great running back. He went 17 carries for 134 yards.
Correct.
But Derek King, 83 yards on the ground and a touchdown, another 144 through the air. But he does enough to extend plays, Drew, that he's going to be a handful. And that UAB defense is really, really underrated.
Here's the thing that you're going to have that Miami finally has that they haven't had in years and years and years is a game record. Yep. The last quarterback that they had as a game record was Ken Dorsey. And now they have that kind of player in King that can not only manage the game, but won't lose the game for them. That was the real tragedy of the Mark Richt era. That was the real tragedy of the Al Golden era, and really what ended up costing Larry Coker his job. Of course, you can only go so far from 12-0 and a national championship, but then progressively go down. And look at the last couple of years of his run as head coach, just adding a loss from a win to where it equaled out. So finally, Manny Diaz has found that person in Derek King. I really like the way that they're built. I like the way that Manny's got that defense going, at least looking against UAB, which you can kind of go if you're a Big Ten team, a Big Ten fan and don't know much about UAB. Oh, but it's just UAB. It's a good UAB team. Not great. The score is exactly what it. Yeah, the score is exactly what it should have been, but that's still a good UAB team. And for Miami to go out and do it says a lot about Miami.
Yeah, one other team in the ACC, and this feels weird to say that I got to talk about, but Notre Dame coming out with a win over Duke. They didn't cover, 20-point favorite, but kind of a workmanlike win. I didn't see, you have Ian Book back for his third year at quarterback in Notre Dame, and I just didn't see the explosiveness I would have liked to have seen out of the Irish.
It's first and foremost, I want to applaud Brian Kelly for actually starting an upperclassman quarterback. It feels like he gets into the routine of, he's an upperclassman, but I really like what this freshman can do, and so he throws the freshman out into the middle of the fire and sees if he comes back burnt. But Ian Book, I think he looked good. If spring football games against other teams were a thing, that's what this Notre Dame Duke game looked like to me.
Yeah.
It looked very ho-hum. It looked, which I'm not looking for you in week one of this whatever year it is, to come out and look like a world beater. I'd like for it to look a little bit more crisp. There were a few times where I went, Duke can't give him a game. Duke's actually giving him a game. Oh, okay. There's Notre Dame.
Until the fourth quarter, I mean, you're talking about a 4-point. It was a 4-point game going to the fourth.
Absolutely. No, this was a game that you kind of needed to pay attention to, especially after Georgia Tech and Florida State had the lightning delays and everything like that. Mm-hmm. Then you had your attention straight on Notre Dame and Duke, especially after the Louisiana game and after the Arkansas State game finished. But good job by Notre Dame to put this one out of reach and take care of their business.
Well, you mentioned Louisiana and Arkansas State, so let's transition to the Big 12 real quick. Top line, Oklahoma, Texas, they did what they were expected to do. It seemed like Oklahoma kind of called off the dogs after scoring 31 in the first quarter. Mm-hmm. Texas, Sam Ehlinger, great game, 25 of 33, 426 and 5 TDs. Now they played UTEP, so is what it is. But, Texas came out and scored 45 in the first half. But the story of the Big 12 this week is not what happened for the top two teams. It's by far and away. The Sun Belt came into the Big 12, went 3-0. None of the three games, well, only one of the three games was particularly close, and that was the Kansas State-Arkansas State game where the Red Wolves scored in the final minute. And then let's not forget, Texas Tech needed everything in the world to get past Houston Baptist by a 2-point conversion.
Yep. No, first and foremost, I want to congratulate the kids and the coaches of these teams, of Arkansas State, Louisiana, Coastal Carolina, for going on the road. Everything in football is about repetition. Just repeat, rinse, repeat. Keep doing the same things over and over again. None of that has happened for anybody across the board. And yet these coaches and their staffs have did the job this week and took care of business. Especially Louisiana. We knew that Billy Napier is a head coach to watch. I think that if Dave Aranda doesn't have a layout of who he was going to hire in his interview with Baylor, I think Billy Napier's in Waco. But
does that loss take a little bit of the shine off of Matt Campbell? I mean, I know you and I hold Billy Napier in high regard, but nationally, I feel like that hurts for Matt Campbell.
It's going to be an interesting situation to see if this is a year unlike any other. I think we need to celebrate wins and not so much celebrate losses as we normally do. This is a year where, in fact, you saw Lincoln Riley earlier in the post game after the Missouri State game. Yeah, we didn't know if we were going to play until this morning. Last night we were at team meeting and had to have a discussion of, do we have enough players to make this game? Mm-hmm. So, even though that's where they were, Oklahoma, they were still able to go out and get the win and look good doing it. There are so many unknowns, especially with Lincoln Riley even pointing out, we're not going to talk about who's out or anything like that because that's competitive advantage for the other team. And he's absolutely right. You really don't hear about that all that often, but especially in college, but it is, especially this year, because you don't know who's going to line up on Saturday. It's the exact one of the things that I thought in my head as I was driving back home yesterday wanted to remind everybody, if the SEC pushes back a game, don't worry. This is going to happen. Virginia Tech still hasn't played yet. Meanwhile, there are going to be a couple of ACC teams that have 2 to 3 games under their belt.
Yeah, the Commonwealth Cup's already been delayed.
Exactly. So no, I hope it doesn't take away from Matt Campbell. To go back and answer your question, I want to push caution in over celebrating, I guess, if you want to give it that term, losses or want to dissect losses even more so than we normally would in a 2019 season, for example.
Going to stay in the Sun Belt real quick because for the second straight week, the most entertaining football game of the week was in San Marcos.
Yeah.
Here in San Marcos, Texas, about 45 minutes down the road from me. If you guys missed this on ESPNU, I think it was maybe ESPNU, ESPN2, I texted Drew because I know he was watching a different game. I said, get on it now.
Yep.
And right when he flipped over is when this stuff happened. So San Marcos, let me get the recap if you happen to miss this game, that Texas State was losing to UTSA in the fourth quarter. UTSA had just scored. Texas State forces a punt. You're going to have about a minute to get the ball back. Instead, they just take a 90-yard kick return for a touchdown to tie the game. Miss the extra point, so we go to overtime, and 2 overtimes later, UTSA finally gets a victory, 51-48. But holy good, that game had great catches. That game had big plays, momentum swings. It was just a blast to watch.
High drama at its best, and it had enough offense to make it really interesting. I was with my parents, so their SEC dyed-in-the-wool, if it's on, they're going to watch it. And so whenever I pulled up the UTSA Texas State game, they both my parents looked at me and went, I don't understand what we're doing here. And then the punt return happened and they were stuck. So just a really, really well-played football game. I hate that Texas State is 0-2 now on the season because they've given us so much.
That's a rough 0-2.
Gosh, it's a rough 0-2.
And the UTSA game is a low-key rivalry. UTSA is a relatively new football program, only been around for a decade or so. Larry Coker was actually their first coach. I don't think people recognize that. But it's only about 50 miles between campuses. It's not far.
If that. No, you could almost it's a nothing drive to get from San Marcos to San Antonio. That was a great football game and a really good one too. If you watched it all the way through, fantastic for you because you got to see something really special. But for those of us who tuned in late in the fourth quarter, it was still really special.
Yeah, and the other one great down in the Sun Belt, too. And I know we're talking a lot of Sun Belt, but quite honestly, folks, the Sun Belt was the best thing to watch all weekend. You had 5 games that were 3 upsets, and then 2 of the upsets weren't really close. Of course, the Arkansas State game over Kansas State came down to the final minute. Mm-hmm. But this UTSA game with Texas State was great. And then down in Mobile, South Alabama christened a beautiful new stadium, by the way.
Oh, my God.
They lost to Tulane, who scored 14 in the fourth quarter. South Alabama had a 24-6 lead at one point. Mm-hmm. But that was another heck of a football game where Tulane, 10.5-point favorites, squeaked out a 3-point win.
And not just that one, but I'll jump up a couple of lines on you and also bring up Georgia Southern and Campbell. Yeah. Another really great football game that came down to the last – they had 3 onside kicks. Just because they couldn't get everybody lined up or touched or blocked the right way.
Is it wrong that I'm more intrigued by the Sun Belt this season than the Big 12 right now?
Or what might or might not happen with the Big 10?
Yeah, which we haven't touched on yet.
We'll get to that later.
Yeah, we haven't really touched on the Big 10 thing, folks. We're recording this on Tuesday night around 7 o'clock Central Time. We thought the news would break that the Big 10 was going to play. It still hasn't. It does look like the Big 10 is going to try to play this coming season starting in October for like 8 games potentially. Maybe the Pac-12 jumps in there as well. The one thing I did see is it looks like MACtion is going to hold off to the spring, potentially at the behest of ESPN, so they can have a little football coverage in the spring here.
XFL this thing.
Yeah, maybe the Mountain West joins in the spring, and we have some really good stuff in the spring to watch.
Have a mid-major playoff.
But the problem though is with some of these other mid-majors playing, non-group of five schools playing already, then that takes them out of potential. But I do wonder, how does an ACC or an SEC or a Big 12 school feel about a playoff potential ranking if the Big 10 teams are only playing 8 games, or the Pac-12 is only playing 8 games?
That's actually a really good question, because I hadn't thought about that particular situation. We're going to get into, remember it would probably be about 15 years ago now. Remember when in like 2004, 2005, where everybody had to win by style points?
Yeah.
And you got to put up numbers, and welcome back, because I think that Ohio State's going to have to live that way, because Alabama's playing 10, because Georgia's playing 10, because Florida and Clemson are playing, 9, 10?
They're playing 10 conference games.
Yeah.
Clemson's playing 11 games total.
Yeah.
ACC's playing 11 total, 10 conference, although Clemson's 11th game is the Citadel, so we can throw that out. But,
they can't even receive a punt.
Yeah, Big 12 are playing 10 games, 9 of them conference games, plus a conference championship. Yep. So the Big 10 is going to play 8 games plus a conference title. So at most, the winner's going to play 9?
9?
Yeah, I would have I'm just thinking, if I'm a school that's on the bubble, unless Ohio State's out there winning by 50 points a game, I kind of have a problem with them making a playoff when they get to play fewer games than I do.
Here's the argument that I'm going to make. Are you going to take 9-2 Georgia, for example? Or are you going to take a 8-1 Ohio State? You're going to take the 9-2 Georgia.
It's going to be, if the Big Ten decides to play, and I'm still on the fence, thinks they may or they may not, because ultimately the Big Ten presidents are going to make this decision, and I have yet to have faith in the Big Ten presidents when it comes to transparency or understanding what their mindset's going to be. But if they do play, I really think that becomes the biggest question, which is, how does a playoff committee view this?
And it's a really good question to bring up, because I agree with you that anytime Al Davis is brought up and the description is, there's a school that's going to Al Davis the hell out of this, and it's Rutgers. Yeah, I don't know if they're going to play, because
why?
No, that's yeah. And to be honest, I kind of want to see what that's going to end up looking like. So, but no, I agree with you. It's definitely a question that we need to keep in the back of our minds, and something that's going to unfold as the SEC gets started in less than 2 weeks.
Yeah, we're a week and a half away from the SEC starting.
As we count up to that Big Ten start date, it's going to be a question, and it's going to be great fodder for College Game Day and ESPN and the rest of folks that do stuff like this.
Well, let's go ahead and start looking ahead to week number 3 of the football season. Weird to say that it is week 3 after the light schedules. It's another somewhat light schedule again this week before SEC play gets going in week 4. Plus, a bunch of the Big 12 schools and ACC schools are taking a week off, because once they get going in conference play, they're just going to start playing. But there are some, intriguing matchups throughout the schedule this week. It's not great, but there is one top 25 matchup, and you have to give top 25 in quotes, because the Big Ten, the Pac-12, all those schools that aren't playing are no longer part of the top 25. So I think Tennessee jumped 10 spots without even playing a game last week.
Yeah.
So it's going to be an is what it is situation. But I think early in the day, Oklahoma State hosts Tulsa. Tulsa traditionally a team that can put some points on the board.
Very true. And it's actually, whenever I saw this, I thought about making this one my upset pick, just because it's the Big 12 against a Conference USA American conference team in the Golden Hurricane. 11 a.m. kickoffs always kind of give me the willies. If you have a solid running game, I feel much better about you. And Chuba Hubbard is just that for Oklahoma State. great running back, is going to do really, really well. The 22.5 seems a touch high for me. I would put it more at 17. And I really like the over on it too, just because I don't know.
I can never bet Oklahoma State in the under. There's just
I just especially when it's like 70 or less. 70 or to 75 is kind of my limit for Oklahoma State. So I would go with Tulsa and the points with the over if we're going about it that way for me.
A couple of ACC games to look at in that 11 a.m. time slot. Syracuse on the road at Pitt. Pitt mercy ruled Austin Peay last week to the point where they agreed to play 10-minute running clock quarters in the second half.
Pittsburgh did a favor for that. That was kind of the parting gift. We know your last game's the next game, so here you go. And Syracuse, they put up a good fight. Dino Babers and the boys put up a nice little fight against North Carolina until the fourth quarter, and then Mike Brown kind of put the chokehold on the Orange. Which, by the way, got to give props to Syracuse. They finally found a really good uni combination. Love those uniforms that they were wearing on the road in Chapel Hill last week. I've got to go Pitt here. I just don't. I'm not sure that Dino's got the guys healthy enough after all their COVID stuff. So I'm going to go Pitt here. The 50, I would stay away from the over, from the over-under line at 50.
I'm not even touching that game with a 10-foot pole when it comes to it.
No. The 22 seems a bit much, but I could see Pitt winning by 24.
Other good game at 11 a.m. in the ACC, Boston College on the road taking on Duke. We've already seen what Duke can do. They can play. Close game, or decent game against Notre Dame. Took to the fourth quarter for Notre Dame to put them away. BC, the last few years, it seems like they want to trend in the right direction. They just need to make that next step.
And I'm not sure that they're ready to make that next step. This is where I'm interested to see, to follow a team like Boston College over the next 2 to 3 years. What does this COVID year do for them? With this year doesn't count against your eligibility. Does this help them? Does this hurt them? They're going to be a great litmus test for that argument. And you could write a thesis article on that just following Boston College. As for this game itself, I really like Duke. I love what David Cutcliffe is doing. I think that they really showed themselves well at Notre Dame last week, even though that they took the loss. So I'm going to go with Duke here. I see them winning by about 7, so I'll take Duke and give the points, but stay away from the over-under at 51.5.
Oh, I'm going way under on the over-under.
Yeah. If I were going to do anything, it would be under.
Boston College. Jeff Hafley took over Boston College, former defensive coordinator for Ohio State. They're going to be a run-first defensive football team. I'm not so sure Duke's explosive enough to make it to where that 51. I think the 51's a gift. This game seems like it's going to be 42, 40 points, somewhere in that range. So I'm going to take the under. Best game at 11 a.m. to me, and also the game that anytime I ever hear our schedule is full, I'm calling BS for the rest of my life.
Yep.
Houston and Baylor. Now, this is a game where Houston was supposed to play Memphis last week. Baylor was going to play Louisiana Tech. And due to COVID outbreaks at Louisiana Tech and Memphis, those games got canceled. And Houston basically said, hey, Baylor, you up? And Baylor's like, yeah, come on over. Let's have a party in the garage. We'll do it in 6 days.
Well, just meet us at the Chick-fil-A in Waco right now.
No, it's a Whataburger. You're in Texas.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You meet at the Whataburger here.
I'm sorry. That's true. That's true. Maybe at the Whataburger, get a double, and we're ready to roll.
It's one of the more hilarious things to me because you always hear our schedule's full. We got to schedule 10 years in advance, and here now it's 6 days. Let's play.
Yeah,
but
let's go. Let's roll.
You get a really good football game out of this, and this is one of our 5 pick'ems. So this will be the first one we talk about here, Drew. Houston at Baylor. Baylor a 4.5-point favorite in Dave Aranda's debut. I
really like Dave Aranda. I'm so glad that he's out of the SEC because he, as an Auburn fan, I don't know if you could tell with all this stuff, but as an Auburn fan, Dave Aranda scared me more than any other defensive coordinator because he figured out Gus to an end. So I'm really happy to see him gone. The 63 is a touch high for me, in my opinion, even though this is going to be a move the ball around kind of game. This is going to be a game of mistakes, in my opinion. So I'm going to take Baylor and give the points because the line's just 4. And I think Baylor can win this one by 7 to 9 points. Maybe get 3 field goal kind of thing. I could see that as well. I would not be shocked if Houston gets the win, though. But I'll take Baylor.
I'm right there with you. I'm with Baylor. I'll give the 4.5 points and put my trust in the Bears. This is not going to be on any one of my tickets, though, for this week.
Nope.
Absolutely. It's the game I'm watching at 11 a.m., but it's not going to be on my ticket at any point.
Yep. Totally agree.
So we'll keep on moving down the schedule to interesting games, and here's one that I just love, especially after last week. UCF goes to Atlanta to take on Georgia Tech, and Georgia Tech's an underdog at home. UCF ranked 14th in the country, 7.5 points favorite over Georgia Tech. And this is in our pick'em.
This is a pick'em.
I'll give you mine first if you need to think.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm good.
Absolutely.
This is my upset special. Georgia Tech goes to 2-0. Yeah. I'm taking Georgia Tech outright. I liked what I saw last week.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not convinced UCF's that much better than they were last year, and they weren't that fantastic. If you kind of go back and remember, really since Heupel got there, it's
been fine.
There's been a little. It's okay, but there's been a little bit of a regression, and I just liked what I saw out of Georgia Tech last week. So give me the Yellow Jackets. Break out all the bees gifts, and I'm going to take them straight up.
I'm right there with you. I will tell I like that. That's not my upset pick. So I've got one a little bit later on. I will tell you a quick story. I was listening to another show trying to get information to make sure that I'm up on everything. And I heard Andy Demetra, who is Georgia Tech's play-by-play man. I know him not well, but I do know him. Good guy. Great, really good play-by-play guy. And they were going through and talking about Jeff Sims and getting the win over Florida State and kind of putting the program kind of back on the map, at least for 1 week, more so than any other week in the past 3 or 4 years, as we chronicled earlier in the show. And the interviewer said, well, Andy, I know you guys have a game scheduled with UCF this weekend. Y'all still going to play that? Imagine, if you will, any time in history, an interviewer, Keith Jackson's talking to Bear Bryant.
Are you still going to play the
game? Coach, I see that you guys have Georgia on the schedule this weekend. Y'all still going to play that game? Are you serious? It's just the world we live in now. And he said, yep, as of right now, we're still scheduled to play that game. So he said everything we're hearing out of Orlando, because UCF had a bit of a run-in with the COVID a few weeks ago, but everything sounded positive. So I'm going to go with the UCF still has a lot of rust to break off, and Georgia Tech did a really good job of breaking off that rust in Tallahassee. Yep. I think the Ramblin' Wreck is kind of well-oiled, and I agree with you. I think they get the win. Not sure about that 60.5 either. I think I might go under, but I'll take the point.
If you're going to hand me 7.5, I'm taking them right now.
Give me that at Grant Field.
Yeah, same time slot, CBS game, and this is just weird to say that this game's on CBS, but Appalachian State goes to Huntington, West Virginia to take on the Thundering Herd. This is another pick'em game for us, Drew. App State, number 23 in the country, 4.5-point favorites.
And you're talking about a Marshall team that looked real good, albeit against Eastern Kentucky, but real good against Eastern Kentucky. And while Appalachian State got the win against Charlotte last week, it took everything the Nears got in them at the Rock to get that dub. So, quick question while I'm figuring this out in my head. Is Uncle Gary going to be there with Brad?
I don't know. I mean, maybe it's like a warm-up game for those guys, but it's very odd to me that the 2:30 CBS game is Appalachian State versus Marshall.
I mean, because technically they could do it in the studio and just kind of get all the bugs kicked out of the system.
I feel like, one of our best friends actually does stuff for CBS. I feel like we could probably ask this question and get this answer out. So
yeah, we need to ask her that.
Yeah.
But okay, so for my pick, Appalachian State, I've got it here as a -4.
It's -4.5. Where I've got
-4.5, 4 and a hook for Appalachian State. Give me Marshall in the points at home.
With you. I'm with you.
I really like what Marshall did on offense 2 weeks ago now. They've had a whole week to get everything worked out and work on everything. Watch Appalachian State this past weekend. I think the 49ers are a little bit better than I gave them credit for. And I kind of mentioned that to you before, in our show prep, that I thought that the line, the UNC -30, against Charlotte this week was a little bit large, even though I think North Carolina wins that game. I really like what Marshall looked like in week 1, or week 0, if we want to call it that, to get the big boy football on to the table. I'll take Marshall at home, especially at a 2:30 kickoff. That I just don't know if I can trust Appalachian State like I could last year with Eli Drakewitz at the helm.
I'm right there with you. I like Marshall as well. All right, so Notre Dame's going to play USF this week. I think we're both in agreement. Notre Dame probably going to romp in that game. Shouldn't be too much of an issue. So 2 other games I wanted to make sure we hit on this week before we get out of here. Both of them in the ACC at their final 2 pick'em games as well, Drew. We'll start with the non-ranked game over in Raleigh, North Carolina. The Wolfpack, NC State, 2.5-point favorites over Wake Forest, who comes to town.
And hello to my upset special. I will take the Deacons here. I thought that even though this is going to be one of those years where in the ACC, except for Notre Dame, Clemson, every time you play Clemson, or each time you play Clemson, you're going to find out more about yourselves than you will about Clemson. You know that that Lawrence is playing against boys. It's as somebody heard.
Notre Dame's the only team that can even put up a fight right now, right?
Exactly. There are going to be a couple.
Maybe North Carolina.
Right now, North Carolina looks like they could push Clemson.
I mean, last year they played a 1-point game. That's the only right.
Exactly. And of course, the obligatory Syracuse game, because apparently Clemson,
for whatever reason,
understands orange helmets, and it kind of confuses them. But I think Wake Forest looked better in the second half, albeit against second and third teamers for Clemson. I think that they looked better. I think Clemson still has, just like what I said before with UCF, I think there's going to be a lot of rust on NC State. And also, and I hate to say this because I have friends that are Mr. Wolfie fans, what has NC State done to warrant me saying, yeah, they're going to be much, they deserve a line, albeit at home, against Wake Forest, who the offense looks good. The defense looked pretty decent against an NFL team in Clemson. So give me the Deeks, give me Deacon and I'll take that 2.5 and take my chances. I'm
going to play against you here and play a hunch play. Okay. I don't have a logical reason for this, to be quite honest with you.
That's fine.
Outside of, I can't trust either one of these teams. So, because I don't trust either one, I'm going to take the 2.5-point favorite. I take NC State to cover, but this is a 3 or 4 point football game. Yeah. This is not going to be much. No. All right, final game of the week to preview as far as our pick'ems go, Drew. The only unranked game this coming week, number 18 Miami goes up to the home of Churchill Downs and takes on Louisville. 2.5-point favorites for the Cardinals.
This was another one that I was rattling around with my upset picks because I am high on Miami after what I watched against UAB. And also, real quick before we jump ahead, my bonus upset special, Louisiana Tech. Take them and take the points against USM.
What's the spread on that game?
That would be a -5 for the Golden Eagles.
Okay.
Don't understand it. I don't know if you know this. Southern Miss doesn't have a coach, so give me those points.
Yeah, I'm with you.
But going back to the game that we're actually going to pick, I'm really high on Miami. I don't know if you realize that in the first part of the show tonight. I really like what Manny Diaz has done. While I think Louisville is up and coming, I don't know if I warrant them being the favorite in this game. I do think that 64.5 is about right for the over/under. But give me the Canes. It's all about the U.
I'm right there with you. I like what Scott Satterfield's doing up in Louisville.
Absolutely.
He's going to have a chance to do, especially coming over from Appalachian State. I just think Miami's a better football team right now. From what I saw the other night, specifically in the second half of their game against UAB, I liked what the offense was doing, what Rhett Lashley was doing on that offensive side. Little creativity shown, kind of showing what happens when he gets away from Gus a little bit and what he can do. He's shown that for a few years now, though, right? When he was at
and especially getting a place that actually has talent, unlike UConn. He's actually got some toys to play with.
He did it at SMU for a while too, right?
So that's true. That's true.
Yeah, he can coach, and we've seen this. And I think he was out of Kansas last year, if I'm not mistaken. I want to say
he might be right.
I think he might have been. I don't know. I liked what I saw to Miami. I liked that their defense was flying around the ball. Not that UAB is a great offense, but they did put up 45 the first week and got held to 14 on the road.
The thing that encourages me about Miami this year is that UAB game was a game last year that they would have just sat on. I can't even remember what it was at the half. They would have just sat on their lead. I think it was 21-7.
Yeah.
They just would have sat on that and won 21-17, but they put them away.
I put more stock in a win over UAB for Miami, a 17-point win, than I do a 14-point win over Western Kentucky. As much as I respect the Sun Belt, and we talk about them all the time,
absolutely,
I think UAB is just a better football team. And I think that's going to bear itself out here in a couple of weeks when they go down to South Alabama, and I think they'll beat South Alabama in a few weeks. But I just, for me, that is a better win. And I think Miami wins this game straight up. I don't even need the 2.5 points. 2.5 points are just, to me, that all that tells me is play the money line. Yeah. Don't even think about the points at this point.
Yep, that's me in Coastal Carolina last week. I totally agree. I think, and you're going to see this until we get to October or middle of October, where the lines just don't make sense. A lot like that Louisiana Tech Southern Miss game. The line just doesn't make any sense to me, so I'm just going to take the money line and make a little bit more cash on my game.
So recap on the Big Five games. We are in agreement for 4 of the 5. The only one not agreement, Wake Forest and North Carolina State. So one of us will take a lead because each of us did go 4-1 last week. Now, depending on who you listen to, you could have gone 3-2 because we each split 1-1 on 2 different games. But we each did go 4-1 last week. Drew's upset special in Coastal Carolina hit. My upset special in South Alabama barely missed out.
If you just took the
lines, which
golden.
South Alabama was in our parlay that we tweeted out. It was an all Sun Belt parlay, all underdogs, and they all came through for you. So hopefully you took advantage of the 3 teams there, as we said earlier tonight. And we'll make sure, like I said, probably Friday night, we'll try to get it out there, maybe Saturday morning. If you follow us on Twitter, that we'll have some kind of a play for you that we think could work. And if something happens during the day, maybe some news breaks that changes our opinion on another game, we'll make sure we have it out there. I know that's what happened with, the Oklahoma-Missouri State game, where all of a sudden the line went from like 43 to 48, and by kickoff it was 50.5, which, end of the day, you covered if you got it at 50.5.
Yeah,
luckily it made you sweat. At 31-0 in the first quarter, you were sweating.
Yeah. Luckily, I got it at 48, and I was very happy that I got it at 48 because it was just a push.
Push works. One piece of news I want to make sure we hit before we go, and it broke today, and I think it's just something, as we talked about COVID and how it's going to affect the season. Les Miles, and I don't know if you saw this, said he believes essentially everyone on his teams had COVID at some point. Not Les Miles, I'm sorry, Ed Orgeron.
Oh,
I've got my LSU coaches mixed up.
Yeah, you're fine.
Ed Orgeron said that, which it to me says two things. One, probably better that some of these schools are waiting to play later.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, it says three things. Two, you're going to see more postponements.
Mm-hmm.
And three, how much of the schools are actually releasing?
You know, one of the things that I did, I drove from my hometown where I grew up in Valdosta back up home to Nashville over yesterday, and I took a little detour and went to Auburn just to go grab a sandwich at my favorite sandwich shop, and then went to go grab some lemonade because it's the lifeblood for some mixed drinks here for a couple of upcoming Saturdays. Yeah. And I made sure to take a left on Donahue after coming into town. Brad, you know exactly where I'm going.
Mm-hmm.
And I went right by the baseball stadium because I wanted to see the new batting facility that they're building.
But you're talking about going right through the heart of campus.
Exactly. But I made sure to go right through the heart of campus and went just to the outside to go back up towards Toomer's Corner. I only saw one person without a mask on campus.
Okay.
Everybody else had a mask on, and I saw probably about 30 to 40 people, which sure, small sample size, but still. That said, it concerns me, and then it doesn't. It concerns me that the schools aren't being transparent because this is just a time when we need to be transparent. There's not a whole lot of transparency in our world. And this is one of those things where we need to be transparent. It also doesn't concern me because if what we're finding out about COVID is correct and that you have 3 months of antibodies and can't catch it for 3 months, if that really is a thing on this thing that we're learning about daily, hourly, minute by the minute. So it makes me wonder, is Coach saying that because he doesn't think this will be a thing in October? Because if all your team has it and you can't catch it for 3 months, does that mean like that you're just like, man, we don't need to test after that? Like we still will.
Yeah.
But you don't need to.
I'm a little more sinister.
Okay.
Let's say it's SEC championship week.
Okay.
And your starting quarterback tests positive.
Okay.
Do you actually release that? Do you put it beyond certain schools to release that information and sit him down? Because you and I both grew up in the heart of SEC country. And I'm telling you right now, there are certain places and schools, and even in the Big Ten and the ACC, I wouldn't put it past them to hide it.
And we also went to a school where even though and people will make fun of me and whatever, after talking with the powers that be, I really don't believe that Cam Newton took any money. However, the fact that we suspended him the day after the Alabama game and then that following Monday he was reinstated by the NCAA, that's still sticky to me. Still feels sticky to me. And it's been 10 years.
There's so much for big time schools that I just don't trust.
Mm-hmm.
I love football. I love college sports.
Absolutely.
Let's be real here. College sports can be shady as hell. At the top levels, college sports can be shady as hell.
To quote the great Pat Dye, I don't know if any big time college program can say that they're completely lily white.
Yeah, it's nuts. I don't know. I think it's an interesting proposition, but it's interesting to think about because for me, it is very much a matter of I could see it happening.
Yeah.
And if it does, you know, what goes on later on? You know, who's the school that finally pulls the plug and is honest about it, and who's the school that maybe tries to hide it to make the playoff?
I can tell you just from my contacts at Auburn that Auburn feels that they're being as upfront as possible.
Yeah.
And they're concerned about other schools doing the same.
I mean, you just had LSU flat out tell you they think they've had pretty much everybody on the team test positive.
Yeah.
But that hasn't really been information that's out there.
No, we haven't heard about LSU canceling practices and everything like that.
You mentioned earlier, Oklahoma doesn't want to give a competitive advantage, so they don't want to talk about it. I don't know. It's one of those things that I think is, as you go along, somebody is going to do something to where it could easily it's kind of screwed up for everybody else, but to be in their own best interest, that's what they're going to do.
Yeah, I can totally see that as well.
All right, buddy. Well, that will wrap it up for this week. Always fun. Hope the drink was good for you, sir.
Still just loving my Florida straight bourbon.
Florida.
FLOR.
Florida straight, Florida straight, Florida straight. Woo! I feel like that's what the chant needs to be after every time they lose, and just people start taking shots on campus.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I've been to that campus. It pretty much is. That thing is a party. All the time.
Yeah, I've been there. I've been there for a party weekend. Yeah, it's entertaining. Tallahassee is nothing if not entertaining.
it is never not a show, for
Absolutely.
Sure.
Folks, glad to have you along with us again. Thanks so much for spending your time with us. Again, you can follow us on Twitter at FOT Podcast. You can do the same on Instagram at FOT Podcast. You can subscribe to us on YouTube at Friends of the Program. You can also subscribe on Spotify and iTunes. Make sure you go hit that like, subscribe button, download it. You'll get all of our information. Again, on Twitter, we'll make sure we put out some picks every week, some plays that we might like. Again, if you're up with us so far, you're up 6-1 on whatever you put down. You know, you put down $5, you won 30 last week on the parlay. You put a little more, you made a little more, whatever the case may be. So we'll try to keep doing that for you. We're not going to promise they're all winners.
Oh, God.
I can't do that. But
can't do that.
Hopefully by the end of the season, you'll be better than the negative territory side of things.
Always good to be black than red.
All right, folks, for Drew McCracken, I'm Brad Tillery saying thanks so much. We appreciate it. We'll talk to you again next week when we'll preview the start of SEC football. It is coming back, baby. Take care, everybody.